There's a lot of things in this old world that just do not make sense. Like why there's so few believers on the firing line, while so many others sit the fence. But if you want to know where the Word of God stands, and believe it wants to use your feet and hands, it's time to take your faith out of the seats and into the streets, and come along with me. If you only look, then you will see on WCN TV.
Well, hello and welcome to WCN TV. For today, we have a very informative and a very important program for you today. Not a topic that a lot of people like to discuss or think about, but one nevertheless that we need to. The topic is pornography addiction and human trafficking, and how that all ties together with things like video gaming and social media. You know, last year we had the situation with Jeffrey Epstein, and that brought a little bit of media attention to the subject, but seems like that was quickly forgotten. And I doubt that we'll ever really know what really happened there. But we're going to be discussing some things today with our guest, Lynn Fredrick, and he is the author of a book called Stand Firm. I wanted to have a copy of it with me to show you, but I loaned it out to somebody and they never brought it back. So it's gone, Lynn. I'm sorry. But we can look at it on your website. But Lynn, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Rob. I'm glad to be here.
I know you also do a lot of speaking engagements when there are those opportunities. And tell us a little bit about your book. It's kind of your personal testimony and also your story. And there's more to it than that, even.
Well, the book is exactly that. It's a journey. You know, my recovery from a 28-year addiction was a journey. It's not a simple prayer. It takes a bit to come back. It's kind of like a journey of Israel going from the Egyptian bondage to the Promised Land. It took 40 years. I kept a journal of my travels for the first 16 years of my recovery, and I went back in that journal and basically put together a book to help other people follow God on a journey to take them away from the bondage in their life to the freedom and the promised land that only God can provide.
And this is your personal testimony. Do you mind sharing just a little bit of your story with us?
Well, you know, my story begins at 10 years old. It starts when I was sexually abused by a neighbor man. Later that year, a group of kids gave me a stack of pornography, and that stack of pornography kept me busy while those kids wanted me to stay busy. And actually, that stack of pornography kept me busy for 28 years. I just couldn't break free from it. I liked what I saw in pornography as a young boy way better than I liked the rape that happened to me by a man. So I gravitated toward that, and I then kept it secret all my life, both of those things, until I was 38 years old. But they were the underlying current that kept me hooked into trying to provide for my needs and find meaning. And I did it through pornography.
And during that time, you were still maintaining a normal life. on the other side, right? You had
Absolutely. I ran most of my life. I ran to God, and then I ran from God, and I bargained with God an awful lot. I became a Christian at 18 years old. I think I surrendered everything in my life except pornography because I was afraid to tell anybody about that addiction. Later in life, I spent 4 years in a Bible college, got a degree in theology and one in psychology, thinking I could help myself. And I didn't help myself at all, Rob. I think I complicated things and made things worse because the fear of being caught went higher, and it deepened the addiction for me. But I was able to carry out a life and have a successful business to a point. But when you do battle with pornography on your own and in secret, you're really up against Satan, and there is no other author behind it in the depths of it. And when we take on Satan one-on-one, we're going to lose. And the word devour, and when in Peter, where he talks about Satan prowls around looking for someone to devour, the word really means annihilate. The same way as a bomb going off, an atomic bomb going off in a city, and it completely annihilates that city. That's what ended up happening in my midlife, and I had to start all over.
Okay, and that was a while ago. Things are exponentially worse today, aren't they? I think I read that the average age that kids are exposed to pornography now is like 10 years old. Is that correct?
Well, it's actually sometimes can be lower than that, 8 or 9. But yeah, at that age, pornography has done a huge impact in our whole society, Rob. I like to say that pornography has been educating the American society for probably about 60 years, and it's gone unchecked. I mean, it's pornography in our world today would be real similar to Proverbs chapters 8 and 9. If you look at those, there's just a few things that Proverbs says. It's about the images of pornography, about sexual images that we see just about everywhere nowadays. Proverbs says it's like a woman dressed like a prostitute. She comes out, she's loud, her feet never stay home. She's in the streets, in the squares. At every corner she lurks. From the highest place in the city, she calls out with persuasive words to lead men astray. And that's what's going on with pornography today. It's affected all levels of our society, where we see sexual images in just about everywhere we go, from magazine covers to TV commercials to halftime shows at the Super Bowl game. It's everywhere. But the problem is that we go on in Proverbs and it says what we don't realize when we go there as a human being is that the scripture says the dead are there. Her guests are in the depths of the grave. And that's where pornography is taking our whole society as a whole in America today.
You've talked about a what you call a pornified society. What do you mean by that?
Well, I
I
think
kind of know what you mean by that, but kind of tell our listeners.
I think a pornified society really gets into the consequences. I mean, pornified society, well, here's some behaviors that are going on, Rob, that we see every day. You see them at work, people that are in factories, offices, they're going to see these kinds of behaviors. They're going to see people flirting with one another, having seductive behavior toward one another that's not their spouse. One night stands, or what we call today is real commonplace, casual sex. I mean, it's on TV sitcoms, it's in commercials, that kind of stuff is going on all the time. Looking at pornography, going to strip clubs, using a choice of clothing to expose yourself. I have a friend from Uganda that came to America. His first experience of getting off the plane was like, oh my God, he could not believe the dress of the ordinary average American woman in America. I mean, but we take it all, we're so conditioned to it, we don't think anything of it. But the use of clothing to expose yourself has become very normal, to where ladies nowadays are wearing basically what they used to wear underneath their skirts. They called them pantyhose, but today that's their pants they're wearing. But other things we see, Rob, on television all the time is using the power of position to be able to exploit another person sexually. And that's with some of the people we see on TV, movie producers and big corporate executives getting called out by people who have worked for them. That even happens with clergy members and employers on the local level at local factories. These are some of the things that are showing up in our society when you call it pornified society. The behaviors, all of them that I just mentioned to you, seem to be normal in our society. But in reality, if you get diagnosed with sexual addiction, any one or all of those behaviors are characteristic of sexual addiction. If you have a pattern of out of control or a compulsion or an obsession with any of those, or it's like you can't stop, then they would all fall into the diagnosis of sexual addiction. But but yet it's normal in our society.
Well, yeah, we've definitely become desensitized, haven't we? I mean,
Yes, we
even
have.
taking a walk through the local public shopping mall, when you used to be able to do that, can't do that anymore. But
No, not right
even
now.
walking through the shopping mall, you know, our grandparents would probably be um, too embarrassed to do that,
Well, they would,
or
but
the convenience store.
it
So,
would. But today, Rob, it's like, well, who's watching this stuff? Is it the guy sitting in the back alley or whatever it is? But some of these statistics come from enough.org. They've been researching statistics on pornography for about 35, 40 years in there. And while 63% of men and 36% of women, while they're at work, at the factory, at the office, or wherever they're working, those men and women are accessing pornography while they're at work. 55% of married men, 70% of unmarried men, and it rises. The younger age, it go to 87% of college-age men and 30% of college-age women are going to look at pornography on a daily and a weekly basis, not just to look at pornography, but to get their sexual desires and their sexual needs met through that experience. Now that's the secular side. We only go to the church side. In the church, we got 65% of the men, so actually a little bit more. 40% of women, just a little bit more. 35% of all pastors. And at the World Conference of American Association of Christian Counselors, there were 3,700 professional counselors there for continuing education. And what was circulating there was that if 100 pastors come for professional counseling, 65 of them are coming because they're struggling with pornography. And if we go to the Christian marriage, 47% of all Christian marriages say that pornography is a problem in their home. So this has become really widespread, but when you come to teenagers, 97% of teen boys are watching porn, 80% of the girls, 23% of the boys, and 8% of the girls are saying they're already addicted. They can't stop. So this is something that's really getting out of hand in America. But for the most part, this is something that I will go talk anywhere. I will do anything to try to raise awareness to pornography. But Rob, thank you for inviting me onto this program, because you're one of the few. Christian sources really don't want to talk about this issue.
well, I find it interesting that the numbers you mentioned are even higher, among Christians.
Yes.
So
It is, and the consequences of that, when it's a pornified society, there's consequences. You add pornography to a marriage, and that doesn't matter whether you're a Christian marriage or a secular marriage, you already got a 50% chance of divorce. But when you add pornography to that, you raise that by 200% more.
wow.
And it's, there's so many studies going on today, Rob, with the effects on the brain. The more pornography you watch, the more gray matter in your brain that you destroy. And that's your ability to be able to communicate, to be able to write, to be able to compose. It really affects that. But there's even more dramatic studies going that shows the effects of the brain, and the pictures of the brain on pornography are the exact same pictures of a person that's on heroin. And what's going on inside the brain is the same thing as going inside the brain of a person who is on cocaine. So we got a serious addiction problem here with pornography. It's just not a matter of, oh, I'm looking at some bad pictures. This is seriously affecting a person's ability to be able to have healthy relationships. It's causing a rise in violence and violent sex on college campuses across the country. They have a serious spike in sexual assault. Well, that goes right along with the 87% of college-age men who are watching it. And I think going into the main part of our discussion here in regard to sex trafficking, the thing about pornography is that when the person goes into rent or wants to rent a woman to have sex with that person, it's not just men renting women, it's also women renting men. There are men renting children, there are women renting children. It's both sides of the spectrum. When we talk about human trafficking, that involves prostitution. You're talking about a person who is 18 years old or older. When you hear the word sex trafficking, you are only talking about children that are being trafficked as prostitutes, and they are the ages of between 10 and 17. And our discussion today is going to deal with sex trafficking, but everybody who is renting, and nearly everyone, not, I don't know if it's 100%, but it's a high percentage of people who are renting people for sex have prepared themselves by watching pornography first, and then they want to act out what they've seen.
And this is the trafficking is taking place in every state in the country, isn't it?
It is taking place every state in the United States, yes. It is also taking place worldwide. But my figures today are only for the United States, and it's the demand for over 1 million children, ages 10 to 17, with the average age of being 12 years old. And to that number are being added 300,000 more children every year. So that's an awful lot of children that go missing every year are showing up in sex trafficking. And you ask, well, how can that be? I mean, that we have probably 1,300,000 children out there on the streets being trafficked for sex. And the bottom line is the demand. Men want children for sex, and pimps want the money. Most of the sex trafficking today is run by the drug cartels. This is big business. This human trafficking and sex trafficking are the #2 industry in the world now for criminal activity. #1, of course, is drug sales worldwide. #2 is illegal arms trade, and tied with that is sex trafficking and human trafficking. So this is big business in the sense of anywhere, if you combine pornography with it, you're looking at, close to $200 billion a year industry.
So, Lynn, where do the kids come from? Are they runaways? Are they is this going on while they're living at home with their parents? How does this actually happen?
The answer to that is yes.
We've got all these
some
million kids.
Yeah.
Are they all missing children? I mean, I remember when we used to have the milk cartons and the pictures of the missing kids. We
Yeah.
don't seem to have that anymore, but it's still going on. So it's probably worse. But where are the kids coming from?
Well, some of them are runaways. They run away, and it's not very long. Within 48 hours, that runaway is more than likely going to get picked up because pimps and pornographers are watching for them all the time, and other predators. But there are an awful lot of these kids are disappearing right from home, right from school. I think probably the awful large amount of them are happening. They make their initial contacts on social media. And there's all kinds of different, there's so many different types of social media today. I don't think any of them are safe because there are predators looking for these kids. And I mean, just an example, a year and a half ago, a 14-year-old girl just disappeared. She didn't come home from school. And it's like the parents were like, they didn't know where she was. They didn't know what happened. She was usually always came home from school. She just disappeared off like the face of the planet. It was a year later that she surfaced in porn videos on one of the largest porn producers in the world. And there were over 50 videos of her being sexually exploited by men. It still took, after those surfaced, the Department of Justice could get involved and were able to track her down and rescue her and arrest the pimp that was selling her into pornography. But it still took months for the parents to get those videos off the websites. And that girl will spend years of rehabilitation therapy to try to get her back to life. And that is not abnormal. That is normal. And we're going to now look at a video put together by Five Stone. It's called Innocence Sold. And we're going to look at three things. We're going to meet Sabrina. She's a victim of sex trafficking. We'll talk about that for a couple minutes, and we'll meet Matt. He's the trafficker pimp. And then in the end, we'll meet Andrea, which was Sabrina's friend. And through those three segments, I think we'll be able to discover how easy this is for a pimp or a predator to get a young girl right out of her parents' home.
Okay.
So let's meet Sabrina.
All right.
I'm not sure if this is the first one or the third one.
This looks like the third one.
That would be the last one we want to do. So we want to go up to
Sorry, folks. This is live, and we're learning. We're learning the website.
the first one should say meet Sabrina, victim of sex trafficking.
Well, while we're working on that, oh, hold on.
I can. I don't have a password for it.
Need to be on the. Well, let's take a look at this video, see what this is. Maybe we'll have to work our way backwards.
Well, as people are watching in here, we're waiting for this. I think the video is under meeting Sabrina, a victim of sex trafficking. She is a high school student that is just going about daily life. That one would be meet Matt, so that's the second one. But this whole videos take place inside of high schools, and it was developed from the corridor of Green Bay to Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin. It's called the Fox River Valley or the Appleton area. And the reason that this group put this together, this professional video targeting high schools, is because a lot of kids come up missing from the schools. And so they put together this video to be able to take into all of the schools there to give kids a heads up on how they were being abducted and swept into the horror of sex trafficking.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really realize that some of these Midwestern states, it seems like they think they're insulated from this, but Wisconsin, especially Milwaukee area, even the smaller towns have really been affected by this. And I also read that Minnesota is one of the key states where a lot of these victims come from. So,
Well, it's everywhere, Rob. It used to be like it could be, more like Milwaukee or more like Green Bay or more like Minneapolis. Well, since organized crime has got involved in this, I mean, we have sex trafficking cases in all 72 counties in the state of Wisconsin.
hmm.
So you pick the remotest area you want in the state of Wisconsin, and sex trafficking has happened there. What they're doing now is that they can, so they have some big event in Milwaukee, but then there's a following event the next week, maybe in Green Bay. Well, they can traffic those girls now because of social media and means of advertising, the availability of these girls in remote places. They traffic them, literally drive them in vans with appointments made between the cities, like between Milwaukee, but all the way to Green Bay, then maybe to Minneapolis, then back to Milwaukee. And those young girls are being trafficked in small communities all over the whole state every week, 24/7.
Okay, why don't we try looking at this and just see what we have here on the video. I'm not sure if this is what we wanted or not, but this may be it.
I didn't really know what I wanted to do in life. I've been in and out of trouble, what your parents would call a bad boy. I just knew that I wanted to make money. I've always been real comfortable talking to people, so I guess it's no surprise that I would get into sales. I have an eye for talent. I find them on Facebook, the ones complaining about their parents or how bad they want a boyfriend. I start chatting with them online. Let them know I care. I don't want to meet the parents or her friends.
No, I'm
I
not.
tell her they wouldn't
We're just
understand.
hanging out.
I become her mystery man. A lot of these girls come from bad family situations, low self-esteem, or sometimes they're just adventurous. I'm exciting. I take them shopping, take them to movies. They get a taste of independence. I become the boyfriend they've always wanted. You wanna try something?
What?
You ever do Molly before?
No.
You wanna do something for the movie?
I don't know.
They fall in love with me. Then, I separate them from their friends and family.
Hurry up, close your eyes.
I invite them to go out of town with me, somewhere private, someplace to make them feel special.
You think he killed all these animals?
I convince them to do things they normally wouldn't do. Take some things they normally wouldn't take. Oh, and I get it all on camera. See, that's how I trap them. I tell them that I'm in trouble, that I need their help.
So you doing this or what? Are we doing this or what?
No, I can't.
You can? You sure?
Some pimps use violence or drugs to control their girls. But I'm a real Romeo. And I can always threaten to send the videos to her parents or friends if she doesn't do what I say.
Get out and I'll tell him to sell it.
No, please.
Don't waste my time. You either get out of the car and you deal with it, or you stay with me and we figure this out and we earn that video back together. Okay? You be a big girl and handle your shit? Yeah, you are.
Okay, Rob, that's a meat mat, the trafficker and the pimp. The first segment would have kind of showed more Sabrina, at home, getting his phone calls, laying in the bed in the evening, looking at his text messages or looking at the messages he would send back and forth. And basically he's what's called a Romeo pimp. And he said that in there, I'm the real Romeo. And that's a pimp that is going to use love, attraction. He's going to try to sweep a girl off her feet, and that's exactly what he did with Sabrina. He bought her gifts and romancing, but as soon as he knows he's got her hooked, then that's going to immediately change because he's got one thing in mind. He wants to make money, and the way to make the money for him is to exploit Sabrina sexually. And I hate to throw these figures out there, but it's a real figure where, a pimp like Matt, if he can get 5 girls and just be dealing with 5 girls, he can make over $1 million a year. So there's lots of money involved in this, and that's why they're willing to spend the time. Sometimes some pimps will spend months, 4, 5, 6 months grooming someone on social media before they ever make that first meeting. And they pretty well have that person wrapped in their hand or around their fingers because they're already falling in love with them, and they want to do anything they can to please that pimp so they won't leave them.
Now, these are individuals, so obviously we have individuals working for themselves, but do we have others that are working for syndicates or organizations?
Correct. Yeah, we have both. I mean, on the counterparts, I mean, people that have been involved in this for a long time on the West Coast, like a place like Riverside, California, that is all drug cartel. There is no independent people. If there was an independent, they would soon be under the jurisdiction of a drug cartel and would be sharing their profits with them. But then they also get the protection of that drug cartel. So this is big business in Wisconsin. Milwaukee is known as one of the training centers for the whole United States. So there are a lot of pimps who will come and train how to do it in our beloved state, in the city of Milwaukee.
And how is law enforcement dealing with all this, or are they dealing with any of it?
It's coming. Yes, I mean they're getting better and better. They're being trained. I mean, before I go to law enforcement, I'll back up. Because if we would have met Sabrina's friend Andrea, and I would encourage anybody to go on to Five Stones and see if they can get those and watch those because they're excellent. But Andrea is the lifeline that could have stopped the whole thing. She did not like Matt. She didn't want Sabrina to be seeing him, but she covered for Sabrina many times. She covered with her parents. She covered with the school. When Sabrina would skip out of school, she wouldn't say anything. People would ask, well, where is she? And she said, well, she's in the bathroom. She would always make up excuses to cover for her because she thought that was being a friend. And that's not being a friend. If you see something that looks strange, like it was happening with Sabrina and her friend Andrea had many opportunities to say something. She could have told school officials. She could have told Sabrina's parents. And there was a time in the video where we would have seen Sabrina dressed the part as a prostitute, and Andrea meets her. And at that time, when Andrea saw that, she was mortified because she knew what had happened to her friend, but she still did not call law enforcement. So if you see something, you have to say something. If you don't know who to call, you can always call local law enforcement, but you have some numbers up on the screen for the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children. Any kind of suspicious activity, you can call that number, or the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, and they are all hooked together with law enforcement now. It's really changing in our state and all across the United States, Rob. I think it's because of the demand is so high. I mean, right now there are online, like on social media of any type, at any given moment, there are over 1 million predators online looking to do exactly what Matt did. They're looking to develop a relationship with somebody online whether that's through a chat room, through video gaming. A lot of the video gaming now have chat rooms.
How
And
does that
people,
work on the video gaming? Because I know you mentioned that, but that's
well,
been something that has bothered me for a while.
some of them, like World War II video game, a very popular video game. You're choosing up sides. You got other people on your team. You generally come up with avatars where I'm not really me. I come up with a different fictitious name. Everybody has fictitious names in that. And you have other people in that game that you're playing with, but you're playing as a team. So you begin to develop relationships. And as those relationships develop, in that one particular war game that is very popular, they have what's called a debriefing room where that particular team can go to. It's nothing more than a chat room. And that's where they go and they can visit and talk and they build these relationships. And once they build that relationship to where that person trusts them, now this just happened that came through the National Center on Sexual Exploitation a year ago. A 14-year-old boy playing video games developed a relationship with what he thought was a very, very friendly man. And eventually, after 6 months, that man wanted to meet him. So the 14-year-old boy went to meet him. Well, it wasn't a very friendly man. It was 5 men. And they abducted that 14-year-old boy, and he spent a year in a trailer house being exploited sexually by other grown men as they trafficked him to men who wanted to have sex with a boy. A year in captivity, he was tracked down and was freed. But that boy was abducted through a video gaming. So it's very common that relationships are developed on these, what they're called massive online role-playing games. They're hooked to the internet and they involve many, many other people. And there are predators playing those things all the time, just looking to try to develop a relationship. And they'll do that through that, like I said, through social media, video gaming, chat rooms, looking to do just what Matt did. The demand is so high, Rob. If national sporting events, and maybe this year we won't have any real big sporting events, but at a sporting event like the Super Bowl, for instance, a lot of people going to those. It's not just a Sunday afternoon. I mean, they're going there to spend days. Well, a week ahead of time and a week after that, pimps will bring their girls from all over the United States to that major sporting event, and they cannot meet the demand for how many children men want to have sex with. I mean, they're people of wealth. I mean, last I heard, a Super Bowl game, I mean, you're paying $3,500 for a standing room only, all the way up to a box seat in the 20,000 range. So very wealthy people. But really, all across all economic levels, we've seen in the last 2 years, we've seen a national football team owner arrested for trying to have sex or to solicit a underage girl for sex here by Ladysmith. Within 80 miles of where I live, 2 high school superintendents have been arrested for trying to obtain an underage girl for sex. Also, a local carpenter has been, and a local factory worker. So it goes across the whole social economic barriers, but the bottom line is men want to have sex with someone who is young. And I think that the warning rings out to me largest from a man that I spent some time writing to in prison. He is now out of prison. But while he was in prison, he gave me a list of people who were also in prison with him, and they're all pornography related. They're all related to, so many people think they're going to watch pornography and everybody's of age. There's so many kids being trafficked into pornography nowadays, and all they are is dressed up to look a little bit older. So an awful lot of child pornography, and you hear somebody went to prison for child pornography. Really, they're pursuing what they've seen on the internet, and there are 500,000 searches every day for teenage porn. So they're looking to watch teenagers have sex, and these people were all in prison for that. A recent high school graduate, an 83-year-old retired railroad worker, several school teachers, a NASA scientist, a general practice doctor, a world-renowned geologist, a doctor from a leading University of Cancer Research, military soldiers, FBI agents, police officers, and many more. I mean, people are going to prison over this and over their attraction to pornography, and it so easily becomes illegal. And as we come to conclude in the conclusion, I'll tell you how easy that can be. But this is a quote from this man who spent 7 years in prison and totally has annihilated his life as a upper class worker. It has destroyed his career where he can never be hired back into it again. And he said this to me. He said, "Lynn, temptation and sin do not discriminate, nor does our legal system. Please tell men the dangers of pornography. It ruins careers, marriages, friendships, and communities. Many men have even taken their life. My cellmate showed me his scars where he tried to take his own life before coming to prison. I too have my own story of trying to take my life. There is no doubt that porn can kill. It is so important that we as Christ followers help each other to find the pain and the brokenness buried deep inside our inner self and allow Jesus to heal them instead of medicating them with drugs, alcohol, and pornography." And you know, as he said, as a Christ follower, he was a Christian when all that happened to him. And so are many others. This isn't a sickness and a disease that just hits non-Christians. It also affects Christians.
Lynn, what would you say to parents that have maybe a suspicion something's maybe not right with one of their children?
I think the very last thing you want to do with your children is don't shame them. Don't say, say, "What in the world were you thinking?" I mean, that's not a good thing.
What do you think? What should parents actually be on the lookout for? What should they be watching for?
I think
what are some of the signs?
Parents should be, somebody who wants to spend way too much time alone in their room is not a good sign. I think social media, I think a use of the computer should be in a public place, out in the open where everybody can see. I think video games, I think parents should play them. I think they should get involved with their child and say, "Okay, hey, show me how this game works." Get involved in that. But I think the parents should always be cautious. Back when, Rob, when you and I grew up, we heard it from our parents all the time: don't talk to strangers. Well, today, parents are allowing strangers to come into their home through social media that if they could see that person standing outside on the porch, they'd never let them in. So parents have to become more aware that there are predators online all the time, and don't assume that this will not happen to my child because, they're way too smart. There have been valedictorians with full Ivy League college scholarships that have gotten caught their senior year in high school and swept into sex trafficking. So it's not, don't just assume your child wouldn't happen to them.
Yeah, it's a different world than what we grew up in, isn't it?
It is.
We had Pong, and we thought that was pretty cool. You had this little ball that went back and forth.
Yeah.
So
we had some easier things, but I think that Rob, there are laws that are changing. I think the biggest thing for all of us is there's two things: don't click, don't buy. It ends demand. Anything you see on your computer, you see a pop-up of a sexy picture on your computer, that is intentional. These pimps and pornographers are high class. They can hire some of the high class technology experts in the world. They know how to solicit you. You click on anything like that, you're creating demand. So don't click, don't buy. That's for all of us. I think there's changing laws in our states, and I think this is really important. Shared Hope International is founded by Linda Smith. She is a retired congresswoman, and she is working in all 50 states to change the laws to prosecute the Johns, that's who buys kids, and the pimps, and that's who sells kids. And it probably 10 years in Wisconsin, 10 years ago in Wisconsin, we didn't have any laws to prosecute anybody. Today, Wisconsin has a B average or a B grade because they now have laws to prosecute the pimp and to prosecute the John. So if you are going to sell a young girl on the streets and you get caught, you could be facing an awful lot of years in prison, could be 40 or more. If you are the John and you are purchasing a 14 or an underage girl between 10 and 17, you could now be facing, up to 25 years in prison. Unfortunately, Wisconsin, they're still working on the laws. They treat the child as a criminal, so she's going to get arrested. She's going to spend some jail time. She's going to get a delinquency charge, and there are no services for her. But I would suspect in the future that will change, and she'll be treated as a victim. And I look forward to those laws changing. But as an example of that, in Wisconsin here, just several weeks ago, the trial of a husband-wife who were trafficking young children into pornography, and they were being sex trafficked. The husband and wife were actually making the videos and bringing those kids in and having sex with those kids and then selling that pornography. They were just, their trials were completed. The husband went to prison for 50 years and the wife went to prison for 40 years. So that's a big help that we now have laws coming on the books to prosecute. There are more coming through the National Center on Sexual Exploitation with Patrick Truman. Patrick Truman was a part of the Department of Justice for many years. He's been a champion in the fight against pornography for probably around 35 years. And they have a law center now, and that is fully staffed and fully manned and just operational just recently. And they are going to go after this, like the gal that was abducted several years ago or a year and a half ago, and they made 50 porn videos of her. That organization is going to go after that website and that distributor of porn. A lot of people don't realize that the distribution of pornography in any way, shape, or form in the United States is against the law. The Department of Justice was kind of gutted under the, I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but under the Obama administration, it lost, they dismantled the part of the Department of Justice that would prosecute the pornography issues. So they've ran scot-free ever since. And this Patrick Truman is going to take it on privately to enforce those laws that are on the federal books and go after these pornographers and prosecute them and hopefully put an awful lot of them in prison and an awful lot of fines to the point where they can bankrupt them. So I'm excited about the work that those two organizations are doing. But Rob, it's really going to take more than that. And this is a Christian radio show or a television show. So I think the most of the audience is Christians. And I got an appeal to all of you. I hear these statistics and they are appalling to me that 90% or 95% of us, 95% of us who say we are Christians do not know enough about our Bible to be able to formulate a Christian worldview. So what we end up doing in that is that whatever's going on in society, whatever everybody else is doing, we're doing the same thing as them. And that has to change. As a believer, it starts with me. I have to have a covenant like Job had in Job 31:1. He says, I made a covenant with my eyes to not look lustfully at a girl. Guys and gals out there, we need to make a covenant with our eyes that we're not going to look at a halftime show during the Super Bowl that we know darn good and well because of the advertisement ahead of time is probably not going to be good. That was a softcore porn strip show from what I've heard. I did not see it because I knew ahead of time, was warned ahead of time that the person that was going to be performing in that would not be safe. Where's the covenant with our eyes? I will not look. It begins there. And then we need to do Romans 12:2, that only 5% of Christians ever do it. And that's to be transformed by the renewal of my mind. I'm not going to think like the world. I'm going to change my mind to think as Christ would have me think. And when we do that, and if we do that, you know what? If the Christians would do that across the board, 50% of the demand would end. That'd put a lot of pornographers and pimps out of business.
Wow, 50%.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a question too. You know, you said that all pornography is illegal. How then, if that's the case, how is it so prevalent all over the internet? How do we have adult bookstores, and why is it so readily available just about everywhere?
Correct. Pornography it's not illegal to make it; it's illegal to distribute it. So what happened in that during the Obama administration, that part of the Department of Justice was dismantled. So there's nobody there to enforce those laws. That's why there's a big push now to change laws at the state level, because then states can prosecute. But there is still a part of the Department of Justice that is there, and that's the Department of Child Obscenity. That's why so many people are being prosecuted when it comes to child pornography, because that falls in a different department and there's someone there to prosecute that. And they're doing a good job. But like I say, there's nobody in the Department of Justice to prosecute. If there was, and if the Department of Justice would enforce those laws, from what I'm told, they would be able to very quickly put the porn industry out of business.
Wow.
But I mean, in defense of our current president, President Trump is very much a champion against sex trafficking. He's willing to do things there. This mix up inside the Department of Justice, from what I understand, is a really difficult thing. As soon as he wants to do anything with the Department of Justice, there's an awful lot of other people are saying that all he's trying to do is protect himself. So he's kind of stayed away from that. But this Patrick Truman is going to kind of work around that by creating their own law center to be able to begin to prosecute some of these cases. But that's why we've seen, without laws, that's why we saw pornography jump on the internet to the point where there's, $3,000 a second being made by porn people. But before we end real quick, I just want to say that I know there's somebody out there that's struggling with this. Say, yeah, I know, Lynn, I've tried to quit. I just don't know what to do. I just can't quit. And I'm going to tell you right now, today, you need to find somebody, a person that you can talk to and tell them the truth, what you've been hiding for how many years. I don't care if there's an AA group in your town, if you've got a church that has a recovery group, if you've got a Sex Addicts Anonymous group, or a Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous group, or a Sexaholics Anonymous, you can Google all of those things and they're going to come up, because those groups are in a lot of towns nowadays. You need to find somebody that you can share that with, because you're fighting a battle that you can't win on your own. You need somebody else alongside of you. And if you're too afraid to talk to them, you can call me. I mean, you can contact me via email, off my website. We'll give you my email. It'll also give you my home telephone number. Call me and we'll talk, and that we can begin to work and get you through this to where you don't have to be stuck anymore, but you can be free.
Okay. Do we have Lynn's information up on the screen, Jared? Okay, so
Yes, he has them up
yep,
there.
715-532-9908, or email, it's God's Promise @gmail.com.
Yep.
So,
And I have a lot of boundaries, as you all know. It's kind of hard to get to me. I have a landline, and I have safeguards to where I don't have internet at home. So, but if you send anything, you call me, you send me a message, I will get back to you. It might be a day or two, but I will get back to you.
and you do counseling of people that are
I will work
struggling
with
this.
somebody, absolutely. I have done that through the mail. I've done that through telephone counseling, and I will also help them find a professional that is close to them. I will help them hook up with other people that are close by, so they don't have to go so far.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Any final thoughts, Lynn, before we wrap it up here today?
Well, I mean, my biggest one is to my fellowship of believers. We need to make a covenant with our eyes, and we need to start taking our thoughts captive and making them obedient to God, and having our brain and our mind transformed to how Jesus would want us to live. And if you don't know Jesus personally yet as your personal Savior, man, you just need to ask Him. Today, more than any time in history, I think it's important that the gospel, the good news of Jesus, comes out, because we can't look to government to save us, but we can look to our God and our Savior Jesus to save us. And Jesus will reach down, you confess your sins, He will take your hand, and He will lift you up out of that pit. And you just do that, and you call me, and we'll share in the journey thereafter of what it takes to walk as a follower of Christ, free of addiction.
Well, yeah, I think we also need to make the distinction between true Christ followers and churchgoers, because, as you mentioned, the stats are higher in the church than they are out of the church, which is kind of a sad indictment of the situation. So
It is, but it's as I always ask the question of people, I don't care what church they go to, but I ask them if they have ever done a fearless moral inventory, which it means taking every thought captive. And I ask them, well, when did you start to transform yourself by renewing your mind? And it's very, very rare, no matter what church, what the name is, even among Christ followers that say they are Christ followers, that are actually doing the work that the scripture asks us to do. So I appeal to all Christians, whoever calls themselves that, to begin to fashion their life after God's word, because that's the only thing that gives us power.
okay. And again, what is your website, Lynn?
It's just www.lynnfredrick.com.
And that's Lynn, Lynn.
Yes,
And Fredrick is Fredrick.
correct.
Not Frederick, but Fredrick.
Yep, just Fredrick.
.com.
I was the first one here from Germany. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a good book. It's a good book. The Stand Firm book is good. So it all comes down to the demand, and the demand comes from that first look.
That's right.
And after that, it's never ending, is it?
No, sometimes the first look is a trigger that takes you right down into the swamp you can't get out of.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Lynn. Next week on the program, we have Gary Kah, who's probably a lot of you are familiar with him. He's going to be speaking on globalism. And the week after that, we have Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North will be joining us on WCN TV. So that's it for today. Thanks for being here.